On Being Ill was published in January of 1926. Therefore, I felt it would be best to focus in on Woolf's diaries from the previous year, 1925, to understand what was going through her mind leading up to and when she wrote this piece. First, though, I think it best to understand what was going on in the world in 1925. It has now been 7 years since World War I has ended. It has also been 7 years since the first women in England were granted the right to vote, but only if they were over the age of 30, property owners, married to property owners, or graduates of a university. This means Woolf would have been eligible to vote, but it would not be until 1928 that all women over the age of 21 would also earn this right. In 1925, Woolf would have been 43 years old, which is ironically the age I will turn in a few months. In October 1925, the first grayscale television image is broadcasted, and the city's first double-decker covered buses were introduced. And we all know how much Virginia loved her buses. Now that we have an idea of the world Virginia was living in when she wrote On Being Ill, let's dive into her diaries. For my section of Virginia's diaries, I chose pages 70 to 83 from Virginia Woolf's A Writer's Diary, which was collected by her husband and spans 1918 to 1941. Again, I have narrowed in on the year 1925, since On Being Ill was published in 1926. Woolf begins her 1925 diary entries in a rather dark mood. Wednesday, January 6th. Rodnell was all gale and flood. These words are exact. The river overflowed. We had 7 days' rain out of 10. Often I could not face a walk. L pruned, which needed heroic courage. My heroism was purely literary. I revised Miss D, the chillest part of the whole business of writing, the most depressing. Her next journal entry isn't until April the 8th, where she recounts witnessing a woman trapped under an automobile in London. All day I've heard that voice. I did not go out to help, but then every baker and flour seller did that. A great sense of the brutality and wildness of this world remains with me. However dark her year began, her novel, Miss Dalloway, and her literary criticism collection, A Common Reader, are very much on Virginia's mind. Both have just been released, and she is obsessed with their critical reception and sales, as I believe most of us would be. While she is preoccupied with thoughts of her 2 most recent writings, her mood does seem to steadily improve. On April 8th, she writes, "But Elle and I were too happy, as they say. If it were now to die, etc., nobody shall say of me that I have not known perfect happiness, but few could put their finger on the moment or say what made it." I love this reference as it directly links to Miss Dalloway. When Clarissa has her encounter with Sally, she says, "If it were now to die, 'twere now to be most happy." This shows, and is important, how prolific of a writer Woolf was. While she is writing On Being Ill, she is also fresh off her masterpieces, Miss Dalloway and The Common Reader. Woolf has begun to experience commercial success and becomes more self-assured and confident in herself. As she says on September 22nd, "Yet I am the only woman in England free to write what I like." And so Virginia writes something as forward-thinking and as experimental as On Being Ill. While her diaries don't speak directly of writing On Being Ill, they do shine a light on her state of mind right before and as she wrote it. There is one line in her diaries that I do feel most connects them to On Being Ill. On April 20th, she writes, "One thing, in considering my state of mind now, seems to me beyond dispute that I have, at last, bored down into my oil well, and can't scribble fast enough to bring it all to the surface." In the critical essay we read for this week's module, Rash Reading, Rethinking Virginia Woolf's On Being Ill, Petty also brings up this exact quote. One of her main arguments is that Woolf saw illness as a mine to draw from, or as Woolf describes it in her diary, an oil well. Woolf's essay is as much about literature, how to read and write it, as it has anything to do with actually being ill. After the success of The Common Reader, she finds herself in demand to write more literary criticism. On June 27th, she writes, "The first fruit of the CR, a book too highly praised now, is a request to write for the Atlantic Monthly. So I am getting pushed into criticism. It is a great standby, this power to make large sums by formulating views." And so she does. She writes on being ill about not only wanting to see more representation of illness in modern literature, but also exposing to the world the power one can take from illness in their own writing. On being ill is a way for Woolf to prove to herself that her illness has a purpose towards her life's most important purpose, the thing that she talks more about in her diaries than anything else: literature.